stay hot. I'm Blaiden Kirk, joined as always by my two favorite co-hosts of all time, Matthew Sponhour and Theo Ashton. We're welcoming back a big-time guest here for an NBA episode that we haven't done in a long time, but the playoffs are here, so we thought, got a little bit of time before the NFL draft. Why not bring Ben on to talk about some NBA basketball? How are you doing anyway? We haven't had you on.
That being Ben Pfeifer, by the way, not any other basketball
Do we
Bens.
have other basketball Bens?
There's probably somebody else,
but there are
there's
other
probably
ones.
There's probably someone else out there with my name that likes basketball. It's pretty common.
No. I actually agree. I mean, we say Ben, they should know.
That's what I was like. I'm like,
world,
but I guess I think about it like we have our group chat, so we just refer to you as Ben all the time, and I always thought about.
I always thought about when I was growing up, like, I wish there were more like NBA players named Ben. There were a few, but like, there's no players named like Theo or Blaiden. Matt might have something. I don't know.
Theo Johnson is about to.
Dellavedova.
He's cooking in Australia these days. That's cool.
Shout out to him.
He is. Yeah, he's still really sick. But yeah, thanks for having me. It's a wonderful time for basketball. Obviously, playoff hoops. We're all very excited. It's draft season too, as well, with college over. This is around this time is like the beginning of the big AAU tournaments too. So lots of basketball.
There you go.
Do we want to talk about the play-in results before we talk about some of the upcoming series? What we saw last night with the Warriors losing, of course, and the Lakers advancing. We don't really have that on the docket, but instant reaction, Matt, Ben, Blaiden, to the Warriors dynasty potentially being over.
I saw a clip from Green Light earlier with Chris Long, and they were talking about how like Blake Griffin just retired and he got in the league in 2009, and LeBron joined the league 6 years earlier, and he just won a play-in game in year 21. Like, what is this?
Not the question I asked, but I appreciate you making it about LeBron.
You just asked for thoughts, and
Steph Curry did lose, so I suppose this is it's kind of one.
All you asked for was thoughts, Theo. You didn't.
You're right.
I feel like
I was thinking more of the Warriors, but go ahead.
I feel like this isn't so surprising. I mean, the Kings actually are fairly injured at the moment. And have been kind of playing not super well. And the Warriors have been playing pretty well heading into the postseason. But then they just have like a total stinker. And by the third quarter, it looks like they're all thinking about Cancun or Cabo or whatever. Matt, I think you said something about this on one of the platforms, but it really is like the two timelines thing.
Yes.
Hard to overstate how much that really screwed them. And I don't even know if it was like the two timelines thing as much as them just like not being able to get the right players for that. Like thinking, no offense to Mr. James Wiseman, but like thinking that he would be their guy to keep this core together. And I don't know, it's just kind of weird. Like I feel like in the modern NBA, like we don't really see too many cores like this that have been together for so long, and then like we watch them like age out not so gracefully. Like when's the last time that happened? Like maybe like Kobe and like those like early 20s.
Yeah, but even that it was
Lakers
like
teams,
Kobe tore his Achilles, and then that was kind of it. And it's like, well, if the main guy is done, what do you do? I agree. Maybe the better point is that they had two timelines, and one of them was really bad. And they didn't do a very good job of drafting guys who could make an immediate impact. And I forget who tweeted this. Maybe it was Carson. And he said the Warriors are somehow both too old and too young at the same time. And I couldn't agree more. They're sitting here like trying to figure out like, how should we play Moody and Kuminga, or do we put in, Steph and Clay and Draymond? It's all that stuff. Not particularly good. Now you're sitting here at a point where, Steph is going to be 37 next year. And I'm not saying he's done or anything, but he certainly is not at his peak. This has not been his best season. starting to slip at
No.
36 is completely respectable, obviously, and he's still a very good all NBA level player. But you at this point are going to have to build something really special to win with your best player being that old, right? And it feels
Right,
like your options again are like, you could push all your chips to the middle. You have picks and you have young guys. If you want to go trade for another star, maybe you can see the team being significantly better next year that way. But if you were going to make that play, it would be insane to make it now rather than a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it feels like Steph, while still being amazing, I think some people maybe even for me like are kind of discrediting what Steph has done this year just because it's not to his standard. But relative to the rest of the league, he's still like an all NBA third, second team guy. But he's probably not someone who can like carry you to a title as your 1A guy anymore. And I'm like, that's pretty normal for a 36-year-old guard. And the Warriors would probably have to find one of those guys. And like part of this failure of the two timelines thing is that the way that Steph plays, especially with his off-ball game, it's like he's tailor-made to age gracefully next to other ball-dominant stars and to scale down when, you know, newer, younger guys come in and take the mantle. The Warriors clearly have nobody who is ever going to, or it seems like they have nobody on the roster, and it seems like there's no real way they can acquire anyone like that. So I don't really know what they do. I mean, I don't think they're going to like trade Steph. I know I've seen people say like, oh, they should trade him for picks. Like that's never going to happen. That they're not going to trade Steph. Like it's just not going to happen.
In a vacuum, it makes sense. Like I get where people are coming from with that. And honestly, like if you put maybe a random person up there, they'd probably do that. Or if it was 2K, you'd do that. But dude, it's like Steph Curry. They're not doing like they're just not going to do that.
Right.
They might let Clay walk.
It's his franchise.
Yeah, I think, and that's what I was talking about in a video on TikTok. It's like, okay, well, to what extent do you blow it up? To what extent do you tear it down? I think they probably think about bringing Clay back, but if it's expensive, they won't do it. And they probably will think about getting off of Wiggins, and they'll run it back with Steph and Dre and hope some development from the young guys comes along. That would be my guess as to where they end up landing.
I would think so as well. I can't imagine them bringing back Clay, especially given like what was it like? It was they reported that Dallas and some other team had interest in adding Clay, and I don't really know if that's like a smart thing to do, but I can't imagine the Warriors will see what he was like this season and really how he's been declining the last couple years. Obviously, Clay is always going to be able to shoot the ball. I think it's pretty clear that he can't get separation the way that he used to be able to. And his shots just are not as open as they used to be. And I think part of that is because Steph and the offense isn't as good as it used to be. And it's like diminishing returns for keeping a guy like that when you don't have the perfect setup to make him work like the prime Dynasty Warriors did. So yeah, I would probably imagine like you can't really rebuild when you have Steph, so maybe it's more of like a soft retool, but I don't really know how you do that.
You probably don't.
Yeah, I'm running out of ways to figure out how they can go into next season thinking it's going to be drastically different. And the reality is that like you won 4 titles and you won in 2022. Like you kind of did it. And there's a limit to how many times you can do it before the wheels are going to fall off for anybody. It's one of the greatest dynasties in modern basketball. They deserve a lot of credit for it. But I think unless they do something drastic, I'm not going to view them as like a serious or probably even a fringe contender next year.
Yeah, I don't know what their approach is going to be, but I cannot imagine that they're going to do anything that would vault them into the tier of like the Nuggets or even like the Mavs or the Wolves or the Thunder or the Lakers or the Clippers or whoever.
Maybe the Kings are just that good.
Hey.
De'Aaron Fox, best player ever.
Did you guys see that Keon Ellis tweeted like somebody found an old tweet from him in like 2014?
Yes.
He was like,
Clay got
trash.
5 points. Damn.
He was like, Clay is ass. And then
Clay
he
got
locks
5
up,
points. Damn.
and then Clay puts up a goose egg guarded by him in like a do or die elimination game. Like that's awesome. That's great.
Ellis was awesome in that game. He was a real
he's
eye
awesome
opener for me. He was athletic. He was knocked down. He was nice.
He's everything they hoped Davion Mitchell would be. And they got him for nothing.
Yeah, and he's on contract 3 more years. Like, I want to say like 5 million total or something really like, because he was coming
they
two
have
way.
super cheap.
So that's a huge fine for him. I think probably if we're talking about just like, they could probably beat the Pelicans now that Zion has, the hamstring issue that apparently is like they're going to reevaluate in 2 weeks. So it's not even
Seems
close.
serious enough.
Seems serious. I have a hard time believing the Pelicans are going to win, get into the Thunder series, and then keep it close enough to where you want to push a hamstring injury, which can really, really mess you up if you try to go too quick with that. So I think the Kings can get in the first round.
This has been the issue with Zion. His hamstrings have been hampering him for his whole career, basically. And it's like this just keeps happening.
Yeah, it was brutal to see him so frustrated leaving that game because he was playing, best basketball. Is that probably in the biggest game he's played, or one of the biggest games he's played in his career so
probably
far.
Since the NCAA tournament.
Right.
Yeah.
And I honestly think they would have won that game if he hadn't gotten hurt. I think they had the Lakers dead to rights. But
hypothetical man.
It would have been pretty tough against the Nuggets anyway. It's not. This is what I felt about Zion for a long time, where I think he's a great player when he's on the floor, but at the end of the day, I'm not even talking about like the weight issue in a way that like maybe people kind of do and it sucks. I'm just saying he's a bigger guy, like physically, like, muscle strong. He's one of the heavier guys in the NBA, and at 6'6", and with the vertical he has and the history of lower body injuries, it makes me nervous. It's really, really tough to overcome that. And as a more physical player who wants to, get up in the air, I think it lends him to being one of the more injury-prone players in the NBA. I don't know how you work around that. I thought it was a great year from him. He got to 70 games this season. That's fantastic. His best mark ever. But if it's ending like this, it stinks.
Brutal. Absolutely brutal. This would be a brutal way for the Pelicans season to end. If they lose to the Kings, it would be their 7th straight loss at home to end the season. And up until this point, they are 5-0 against the Kings this year. They've beaten them 5 times. And I honestly don't know if that's ever been done before, because they played an in-season tournament game where they destroyed them. So they have that extra game. I do think the Pelicans generally are like an extreme matchup difference type game with the Kings. The Kings' like lack of wing and forward defense outside of Keegan really is exactly what the Pelicans are built to exploit. And the Kings did get destroyed earlier in the season when the Pelicans had no Zion. But of course, this is a different level of intensity, and especially given that Ingram is certainly not right, whether that's him still recovering from his lower body injuries or just shaking off the rust. Like, he did not look good at all last night when he played, and they benched him in the 4th quarter, whether that was to like send a message or just minutes restriction or whatever it was. Like, it's not looking great for the Pelicans. It really is.
We need CJ McCollum to not be the worst player in the history of the league.
Seriously. And he's had such a great season. And if they can just get him to step up. I mean, the Kings are still due. He is due. The Kings are still missing Herter. They're still missing Malik Monk. And, no offense to the Warriors, but they're not, I don't think they're really as real as the Pelicans, even probably without Zion. But we'll see. I don't know. Regardless, I think whoever makes it is getting wiped by the Thunder, assuming Zion doesn't make some kind of miraculous return within the next week or so.
Yeah, the Pelicans won't get gassed and like be visibly pondering their legacies in the middle of the 3rd quarter if they go down double digits. I swear, it would be like the middle of the broadcast, and like pan to Curry, and he's like looking at Clay, and I can almost see him being like, "Damn, this is really it." That was like the entire 3rd and 4th quarter.
Chris Paul's like staring at the game clock. He's like so close to being on vacation. Like,
Valanciunas is not going to be looking at Brandon Ingram and thinking if it starts looking bad in the second half.
Yeah, Trey Murphy's not going to be pondering his legacy. They're going to be grinding to make it come back.
Right.
I do think either of those teams will be food for the Thunder.
Oh yeah.
I know OKC isn't a perfect one seed or anything, but you're talking about two banged up teams going up against a very good, well balanced squad. I do want to. I kind of want to talk about some of the teams in the Eastern play-ins, but the problem we have is that we're recording this before they happen, and it won't come out until after they happen, outside of the final game.
Y'all may have to check TikTok.
Yeah, y'all might have to check TikTok on that, because every other series we're going to talk about, we won't hit, I guess, who the Knicks are going to be playing in the East, and we won't hit who the Thunder are going to be playing, or who Boston's going to be playing. But every other series we can get to. So I think it's probably better if we just go ahead and skip to that. And why don't we talk about, the newest series that we just learned about, Nuggets versus Lakers, running it back for a third time in the LeBron Jokic era. I don't think they're going to get swept like last year, but I have a hard time believing the Lakers are going to be able to actually pull off 4 games.
Yeah. And to be fair, I would say last year's sweep in the Western Conference Finals was as competitive as sweeps get, right? Like almost every game was pretty. Almost every game was pretty.
I can hang,
but then Lakers fans would go tweet that and they'd be like, "This was the best sweep ever. We played the best of any sweep ever." And it's like, dude,
it does sound really sad. It does sound.
Hang
really
the banner.
Sad.
Next to the play-in banner.
Next to the play-in banner, most competitive sweep of all time. But yeah, I have a hard time seeing the Lakers getting more than 2 games off of the Nuggets, as well as the Lakers have been playing recently. And as good as their offense especially has been post All-Star break, like, it's just the Nuggets. Like, and theoretically, right, if someone's going to match up with Jokic, AD is probably one of the better players to have, but we've seen this story in the past, and it doesn't really matter who you have against Jokic. When you're that level of player, there's only so much you can do, and pretty much hoping the others fail. And the Nuggets others are having fantastic seasons. Jamal Murray is playing out of his mind. His playmaking specifically this year has been phenomenal, both with and without Jokic. Michael Porter Jr. is always good. Aaron Gordon is one of the best, like, defender, cutter types in the league. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope's having an all defense level year. They have some good wings off the bench. Like, I don't know. I guess it's possible, and I'm never gonna like fully count out LeBron as long as he's like this, but I probably would not pick the Lakers in this series. But
are you of the opinion that Jokic is the MVP?
Yeah, I think so. Okay. I think it's pretty close, and like I wouldn't begrudge people who have Shea or Luka or even Giannis. Like I can see arguments for any of those guys, but ultimately I think Jokic is just like the best player in the league. Ultimately, like obviously Luka is amazing, but he like Luka and I think Shea and Giannis just all have more limitations than Jokic, who really at this point in his career has basically none. There's always going to be some way you can exploit him on defense, but you can say that for all of the other MVP candidates, aside from Giannis, really, who has his own offensive issues. Jokic is one of the most dominant, efficient scorers, both with and without the ball. He's obviously maybe the best playmaker of all time and certainly the best one in the league at the moment. Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, all of the advanced metrics adore him like they always do. That hasn't changed and probably never will change until he retires. Yeah. But yeah, I'd probably vote Jokic, but I don't think it's like wrong to have Luka or Shea, or they're having great seasons too.
No, I feel the same way. And I agree. Anthony Davis guarded Jokic for the most part pretty well in the Western Conference Finals last year. It's just that it doesn't matter that much, and that's the problem. At any point, he's due to shoot a moon ball over you, and then that's it. So,
yeah,
I also
pretty much
worry a little bit about offensively. LeBron is a lot better now than he was last year in the Western Conference Finals. He was shooting really poorly leading up to that. Now he's absolutely turned it on. He's shooting fantastic from 3, and his foot isn't bothering him. He seems to be a little bit more ready to go, but it's certainly not prime LeBron, and it feels like he doesn't attack as much as he used to. And that leaves Anthony Davis, who I think is a little bit too prone to try to post up and be physical with guys rather than maybe like run the pick and roll a ton, which is what I really want to see them do. And Jokic is just not the guy to go after trying to get physical down low with him. And then D'Angelo Russell, who has been playing very good basketball recently, but definitely can get into a mode where he'll get a shot or two to fall, and then he's just putting it up early, kind of no matter what. And that's fine when it goes in, and it went in last night, but I wonder if there's going to be some games where it doesn't, and you throw away some possessions, and you can't do that against Denver. So
no, you can't.
I'm a little worried about that. I think 2 games is the amount I'll give them. I think they can get to 6. I wouldn't be shocked if it was 5, but I think they can get to 6.
I think I would agree with that. And the Lakers, I think, probably are better constructed offensively than they've ever been to take advantage of the Nuggets and their weaknesses. They easy shots at the rim more than almost any team in the league. We saw them destroy the Pelicans over the last 2 games at the rim, and especially with Aaron Gordon off the floor, the Nuggets can be really vulnerable at the rim. They rely a lot on their wings. I mean, Gordon's not really even a big, like he's like a 4 hybrid type. Like Peyton Watson might be their second best rim protector on the team. And then there's Jokic. That's always the thing, right? It's how do you manage the Jokic off the floor minutes? And maybe if the Lakers spread out, play really fast in transition, the Nuggets are going to want to slow the pace down. They're going to want to work through the Jokic Murray 2-man game as much as they can. They're going to want to get Michael Porter and KCP their shots off screens and their cuts to the rim. But maybe if they can speed up the Nuggets, they can use Rui. Rui has been a great cutter and like an off-ball scorer recently, and he could potentially be a matchup issue for some of the Nuggets' smaller defenders. Like you said, D'Lo's offense has been phenomenal. Reeves is having his best playmaking season. So they have the offensive juice to hang with the Nuggets for sure, but I don't think they can really do much with Jokic. I mean, that's the kind of trade-off they've made this year with their roster construction. Like their defense is not nearly as good as it's been the last couple of years when they've had maybe the best or a top 3 defense in the league basically every year. And this year with this more offensive guard-heavy personnel, a team like the Nuggets who's vigilant about hunting mismatches and just getting opponents in positions where there's just nothing they can do. Obviously, with Jokic at the helm of that, I don't really see much of a way for the Lakers to beat that 4 times out of 7. Like,
yeah. And I mean, you look back at when they won their title, they just don't have that defensive personnel whatsoever. I mean, with Caruso and KCP gone. But I will say, anytime an offense gets really, really stagnant, I think about the 2021 or 2022, I can't remember which Lakers, and how stagnant that offense was when they retooled everything and how bad it was. They're always like the bar I hold teams to when being bad at moving. So being better at that has been huge for them, 100%.
Yeah, I looked it up. The Lakers are the most efficient team at the rim this year. They shoot 68.2% there, and they get there the second most of any team in the league, only behind the Magic, who honestly is probably more a case of their shooting being so bad that they have to resort to that rather than, which, you know, I assume we'll talk about the Magic at some point soon. And the Nuggets allow a lot of shots at the rim. They're generally okay with trying to limit threes and those more high value spacing shots and living with their opponents trying to score over Jokic and their guys at the rim. So maybe the Lakers can take advantage of that and just pound them inside, get really efficient points at the basket, at the free throw line. But that'll probably be their path to upsetting the Nuggets,
and
if there is one.
What worries me is sometimes I feel like they get away from that a little more, not necessarily like last night. I guess maybe I'm overreacting to that. It felt like it's like,
oh no, I think they did for sure.
These guys in a pick and roll, or you know, LeBron like really just go at them and try to get to the
last
rim
night, like
waiting for
the Pelicans adjusted well, I think, to really go like heavy with their switching and also being picky with who they let like switch on to LeBron. And the Lakers were content just letting them do that and like, you know, running their, you know, crappy ISO ball, stagnant stuff, and they got back in the game. So yeah, I definitely do agree with you, Matt. There's like a focus element that's not always perfect, but you know, it's the playoffs, it's LeBron. Who knows?
So I've got the Nuggets in 6 would be how I'd put it if I had to make a pick. I don't know how y'all feel.
I think I'd agree.
That feels reasonable.
Yeah, I don't really have too much to add. That it's the Nuggets playing the Lakers, man. I'm not going to predict a Lakers win, but maybe
Right,
maybe 6 sounds about right.
Someone's got to do it. Theo, take one for the team.
You know, it's the best team in the West and the best player in the league versus not that. You know,
and the head coach aspect of it too. Like I'm taking Malone over Darvin Ham any day of the week. And when you get that head coach best player combo that is, you know, both in favor of one team, it's tough.
Yeah.
To project anything else. So I'm taking the Nuggets, Blaiden. If you want to be the odd man out, be my guest.
No, I won't do that. But we have your sons, Theo, up next against the
my
Minnesota
sons,
Timberwolves.
my boys.
Your boys.
Your beautiful baby boys.
I'm feeling decently confident about this series. Not that I think they'll easily win or anything, but like I think that they have a really good chance to win. I think that the Suns are kind of built to beat the Timberwolves. Like they're just a bunch of shot makers. I think inherently in these matchups, the Timberwolves just concede too much space with the way they play defense for the Suns, and the jump shots just have absolutely killed them in their matchups. And the Suns are 3-0 against the Timberwolves, and their offensive rating is like through the roof when they play the Timberwolves. And I think a lot of that is wonky numbers and outlier stuff, and it's not going to be like that through the course of the series. But I do think it's indicative that there's something there. There's something that the Suns have that the Timberwolves have really struggled to defend, and I think that'll continue to hold true. So I'm feeling okay about the Suns matchup, but I would like your guys' thoughts as bigger basketball experts than I about how the Timberwolves defense fits in with guarding the Suns offense and all their shooters.
Yeah, I'm quite excited for this series. I think that, as you said, Theo, the Suns have given the Wolves problems with their shot making. And I'm very curious to see how this Wolves team adjusts and kind of adapts in the playoffs. Because last year they weren't fully healthy in their first round series. And this year they are. They have all their pieces. And obviously, like Naz Reid is as good as he's ever been. Towns is having a better year than he did last year. Gobert is having a better. Like pretty much everyone got better for that team while like retaining the same core, which is always good. I do think that we could see some issues with the Suns' lack of size and defensive like guys just in general.
Yeah.
Especially I think when the Wolves go to their two big lineups, which the Suns have been able to handle pretty decently in the regular season, but I can imagine in the postseason with like a bunch of time to game plan that they figure out ways to just like exploit Nurkic's lack of mobility and like whoever you're playing at the four, right? Like the Suns don't want Kevin Durant to be expending all of his energy like chasing Naz Reid and Karl Towns around. He might have to because he's like might be their best forward, like probably is their best forward defender pretty eally.
He is, yeah.
Absolutely. And he's probably going to be checked by Jaden McDaniels all series, which is going to be also a lot of effort to get around. Obviously, Durant is Durant, and he's going to get his. You know, he's Kevin Durant. What do you do? But I do think the Wolves, in theory, should be pretty well equipped to defend this Suns team. And I think, again, using those double big lineups to protect the rim, I wonder if the Wolves are going to make a point, like you said, of protecting the three-point line more than they usually do because of how jumper heavy the Suns are. All of their stars are really great shooters, and obviously Grayson Allen's having like the best shooting year of his career by far. He's been phenomenal this season. So I do wonder if the Wolves are going to like change up their strategy a little bit and give up less jumpers, because the Wolves give up the most mid-range jumpers of any team in the league. They will let you take mid-range jumpers, and the Suns are one of the best mid-range shooting teams in the league. all of their stars love to take mid-range jumpers, and they will make them on those nights. And then I think it's also going to be a case of like, what are we seeing from Anthony Edwards as your primary initiator in the playoffs? And as he looked pretty solid last year, he's taken steps forward this year, but he's still obviously very young and doesn't have a ton of postseason experience. But I think the Wolves have enough experience on the roster, like with Conley. Gobert's been in a lot of big playoff games, that they're going to have tools. And I think it's going to be a really interesting tactical matchup, though I do probably think the Wolves are going to win.
I agree. I think any series that Gobert is in is always interesting tactically, how teams deal with that. I think being as big as Minnesota is really helps them because otherwise I think you'd want to go small. You'd want to go 5 out if you're Phoenix, so that you can try to get Gobert out of the paint. I think their strategy probably more likely is going to be, we can't deal with being that small against a double big lineup consistently, and we're just going to hope that they keep giving us the mid-rangers because that's what we want anyway, because we're not that focused on getting to the rim regardless. So then how does Minnesota counter that? Because they like to, drop Gobert a lot and have him play around the rim. I'm sure that's kind of what Phoenix wants to do. And they're saying, we got to hit our jump shots. That's our path to winning this series, really any series they play in. So I'm interested in it. I don't think they have anything consistently for Anthony Edwards, would be my guess. And while he is young, and I could see him maybe having some bad games, he played really, really well last year. He's an even better player. He's going up against a not great defense. I feel like Ant is just like
one of those guys who's built for it.
He just does have it. Like, I have no reason to believe, other than I guess like his age, that he isn't going to be fantastic. I will say there is a lot on him. They're asking him to do a lot because outside of Anthony Edwards, they're the guys they have initiating offense in half court, not always the best, not always guys who are going to go create big advantages. So the pressure's on, but I think he will get it done. I think the Wolves will win this series.
Yeah, I would say that's for sure my biggest worry at like a macro level with the Wolves. Like outside of Anthony Edwards, like they just don't have guys who are like dynamic shot creators from the perimeter. Like Conley is still fantastic, but as he's always been, he's more of like a setup playmaker type. Who's not necessarily looking to score 20 a game. That's just never been his MO. And Towns, while he's had success sliding back into like a more complementary role next to Ant, like as the main star, he hasn't been able to, perform in the playoffs as that number one guy in the past. So maybe if the Suns can figure out something defensively, like if they really want to like lean into like trapping or blitzing Ant. But like then again, they just don't have the personnel to do that. Like Nurkic is someone who you have to keep deep in the paint. That's like pretty much the only place he's giving you value on defense with his size and his strength. If you bring him out and try to like trap and blitz at point guard, you're going to get smoked. Assuming Ant can make all the right passes, which is to be determined, right? Maybe the Suns are like, we're going to rely on this young initiator to make bad decisions and to not be able to handle the pressure. But if Ant shows he can do that, then I'm not really sure what else your plan is. And yeah, the Suns, like, especially that there's going to be times when the Wolves can go double big and like Drew Eubanks is going to be on the floor or Bol. Like, I don't really think there's any way to truly avoid that. Like, you can't play Nurkic 40 minutes a game.
No.
You really just can't.
No, you cannot.
You can try.
You can try. And even then, he has his he's been pretty solid for Phoenix this year on both ends. He gives them a really important dimension that they don't have. But like even him is a guy who I think we've seen teams exploit in the regular season by pulling him out and making him defend in space. And I think the Wolves, Chris Finch is a really great offensive coach who, despite like the personnel not being incredible offensively, and then just that defense, like it's ridiculous. Like 1 through 5, like especially with like Cat off the floor lineups, like they have plus defenders at every single spot. And Gobert is having maybe his best defensive season since like one of his early Utah years. Like he's been phenomenal guarding the perimeter and guarding high and drop. He's been amazing protecting the rim. And, there's always whatever narratives there are about Gobert. But as I've kind of always thought, the Gobert issues in the playoffs are more about his offense than anything. Like, it's not his fault that, like, teams spread him out with 5 out, and those Jazz teams had nobody else who could rotate, be the low man, and protect the rim. But Gobert isn't a good offensive player. He never really has been. So maybe the Suns can use that as a way to exploit. And I also think Beal is going to be a huge X factor in this series. He's played fairly well as of late, and I would imagine that the Wolves are going to send a lot of aggressive pressure at Durant and Booker, as they tend to do. They're a very aggressive defense, as a lot of kind of best defenses are in the league. That's kind of like the meta nowadays when it comes to like the best defenses. Especially like Booker is a huge playoff riser. Durant, obviously a huge playoff riser. It's like, if Beal can be that legit third guy, then that could be a difference too.
Yeah, and he was in the last matchup between the Timberwolves and Suns. He had so many shots where the closest guy to him was Gobert, like 10 feet out in front of him, and he just drained an open three. And I think that's going to be, can the Timberwolves overcome the weirdness? Because I just don't think they're designed to defend a team that could go 0th percentile shot percentage in the paint and be fine. Like, that's how they want to play. I feel like the ideal Timberwolves matchup is some team that runs through maybe their center and they have to score on Gobert all day. The Suns are just not like that, and I think it could get a little bit wonky for the Timberwolves. It has gotten a little bit wonky for the Timberwolves. Now, I saw a stat that, like, the shot quality for the Suns against other teams versus the Timberwolves was like damn near the exact same or exactly the exact same. And their 3-point percentage was just like crazy high versus the Timberwolves. And that's just where variance comes in. And maybe their success against the Timberwolves is all that variance. But I just think the way they can hit jump shots and the shot creators that they have is just going to make life very weird for the Timberwolves defenders. And I think the Suns will eventually lose in the playoffs, no doubt about it, because they're kind of a house of cards with their depth and their defense. But the Timberwolves offense is just not quite the one I'm the most worried about exposing it. I'm underrating him, and he's just going to go absolutely crazy in the playoffs. He might, but I'm worried about the Europeans more. I'm worried more about the Europeans than Ant, to be completely honest with you, as the guy who can just...
Okay, Gilbert Arenas. That's... we'll worry about the...
I mean, Luka has like ruined the Suns franchise. So that's...
I mean, I would too, and Jokic as well. But yeah, one more. I do think against those, like, I wonder if, like you said, the Suns will just like say, screw it. Like, we're going to go small as hell against your big lineups, and we're just going to try to get your worst on-ball defenders through a bunch of screens. Because again, like, if there's one thing Nurkic can do, it's set a hard screen. And that's what they did in the game on like last Sunday or whatever to get Beal free. And especially if you can get a guy like Kyle Anderson or even like Towns or Naz Reid forcing that matchup on Beal, or even Durant, like, you could have some real success on offense. And the Wolves can't play all of their elite defenders the whole game. So
let me get Suns in 6.
Wow. Suns in 6.
Let me get Suns in 6.
Big time. I'll say I feel like the range of how this series can end is very wide, because there's going to be a lot of variance from the Suns. And it's like, well, how many games do you get where they just shoot so good you can't do anything? Which it seems like certainly there's going to be at least one. I don't know. And there's honestly like no good way to predict that. But I think a team that has Devin Booker and Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal is going to be able to put up a heck of a fight. So I'm going to take the Wolves, but in 7.
I am going to take the Wolves in 6. I agree with, generally agree with both of you. I think the Suns are this kind of team that, with like their top heavy roster construction, and is like, we're just going to put together a bunch of like primary scorers who are sick in the playoffs and see if that can work. But I'm skeptical that their limitations with their defense, especially, and kind of the lack of like lineup versatility they have. Like, the Suns pretty much can only play one way, even with their different lineups. Like, Beal and Durant and Booker, like they can't really diversify their offense as much as I think a team like Minnesota could, even if their talent is more flawed. And in a playoff series, that could be a difference. So I'm going to go Wolves in 6, but I think it's going to be a competitive 6 games.
Fair enough.
Theo, I'll help you out here. I'll take your
Let's go.
side.
Yeah, we'll go 2-2.
We'll go 2-2. Someone has to help. Someone has to help out Theo here.
That
Can't be
leaves
all
us
by
with only
himself.
one other series in the West, Clippers versus Mavs. I'm not feeling good about this one for Los Angeles.
I'm
to be
really,
completely honest
really
with you.
excited for this series. So excited for this series.
I'm kind of a Harden defender. I thought that clip at the beginning of the season was a little bit overboard, blaming Harden for literally everything that went wrong in the entirety of his career. I think that's like dumbing it down so much. He's not going to play good in this series, though.
No, man, that's what happened.
It's like it's all his fault every time, everywhere he goes. It's like, here's the thing: we don't know. Maybe Daryl Morey did lie, bro. Like, oh, he got out of the net so quick. Maybe he dude. It kind of
maybe
was right, dude. Like, I don't know. And he just hasn't his hamstring stuff. He's playing really bad basketball recently. But on top of that, that may be okay. We could have the conversation. But on top of that, the Mavs are playing the best basketball they've played with Luka. I think, at least in the regular season. Maybe you say the Western Conference Finals run was better, beating the Suns was better because that's the playoffs. But it's up there. And then Kawhi has a swollen knee that, he's going to be ready, but he's not ready for 5-on-5s. That was said today. Not sounding good, man. That's not sounding like we're getting 70 games of perfect Kawhi. Maybe I'm wrong. He did play 70 games this year. 73 are a lot. But if he's
but it
not,
doesn't really matter how many games you play if these are the ones you miss.
Yep. Absolutely. I think both these teams are kind of, obviously the Clippers love to go through their main guys, and it's like, okay, this guy to this guy. And the Mavs love to do, feels like kind of a similar thing. I think that the offensive initiators for Dallas are just better. I just think Luka is up there with the best player in the world. I think there's a real case that he is the best player in the world with Jokic right now. He's about as good as you could possibly be while not being that at worst. And then Kyrie is playing some of the best basketball that he has ever played. They've got to feel like they just nailed the Kyrie trade. So I'm going to go with Dallas, especially since I feel like they've got a lot of options with what they want to do size-wise now after the deadline with PJ Washington and Gafford and all of them. I don't think they're the greatest defensive team ever. I think guys are going to be able to get theirs against them, obviously. But I think with a banged-up Kawhi and a Luka who always goes off against the Clippers and a Mavs team that's just firing on all fronts, I got to go with them.
Yeah,
if they shoot,
it's not looking great.
If they shoot Kawhi up with something, though, and he comes in and looks somewhat like himself, I do worry about the Mavs defense. Like, who do they have out there? If Kawhi starts to hit a few shots early, it's going to look like, oh, man, the Mavs really do have the worst defense in the playoffs, and they have nothing against this. That's the only thing that I could see being a major problem is their defensive personnel just being we all get reminded of how much of a flaw that it is. And even though they're playing their best offensive basketball going into the playoffs, maybe it's not all sunshine and roses once playoff basketball really begins, and they play more 50th percentile of what they're capable of, something more average. And then you're like, oh man, they got Kawhi and we got no Kawhi, and I don't know where our defense comes from. I guess that would be my concern about the Mavs.
And I think you can kind of say the exact same thing about the Clippers, who it's like they have Luka. Our defense also isn't that great. What do we do? And to the Mavs' credit, their defense has been much improved since the All-Star break. I think they're top 10 in defensive rating over the last 10 or something games, which I don't think is totally real. I don't think they're a top 10 defense or anything like that. They do have a lot of limits. Lively has been phenomenal this year as a rookie. Gafford's been a great pickup, but those two definitely have limitations as interior defenders. And a lot of the Mavs role players are kind of they swing one way or the other. You're playing Maxi Kleba or Josh Green or Exum mostly for defense, and you're playing Tim Hardaway or Jaden Hardy mostly for offense. And I think those are definitely going to be possible areas that they can exploit. But I do think overall, I will give the Mavs credit for the defensive work that they've done. Just generally watching them play, their rotations are much sharper. They've played some lineups with Kleba and Washington together as the bigs, and those have been really effective with kind of being more mobile and shutting down teams with their switching and their kind of unconventional, like rotating from weird places on the floor. But again, when the playoffs come around, everything changes, and I think that's going to be a big question: is can the Mavs sustain this defensive uptick into the postseason? But one thing that I don't think is a question is if Luka's going to show up, because Luka is, probably has a case as the best playoff player in the league right now. He is absolutely unstoppable in the postseason, as his like slow play, just like beat the crap out of you style translates so well to the playoffs, where he just wears teams down. And I also don't think anybody but Kawhi is really well suited to handle that. And Kawhi is like a good defender still, but he's not the defender he used to be. And of course, this is still assuming that Kawhi is actually going to be healthy, is actually going to be playing. Right. Exactly. The Clippers defense this year has not been that great. And I think they're especially exploitable in the pick and roll when Zubac is out there, like, who's pretty solid, but Luka's just going to be spamming like high lobs and Spain pick and rolls with Gafford and with Lively at those guys. And Kyrie can pretty much do the same thing. And obviously the Clippers, Harden's defense is not particularly great. Paul George's effort these days, goes up and down. And obviously he's had his own fair share of injury concerns. This was my thinking about the Clippers trade at the time. Like, getting Harden is buying you like injury insurance, right? I don't think it's fair to expect all of these guys to be healthy at the same time during the playoffs, because we just haven't seen it in years and years and years. Like, it's just, I just don't think it would be smart to expect that. But hopefully, like last year against the Suns, when they literally were relying on Westbrook to be there to try to carry them to wins, it's like, if you have Harden instead of Westbrook, like, you have a shot. And the Clippers, for a decent stretch of the season, were playing like one of the best teams in the league. They were, defending really well. Their offense was totally unstoppable. Like, I was at a Clippers Suns game early in the year where the Clippers just throttled like a fully healthy Suns team at home. And then I've been to other games later in the season where they just didn't look very buttoned up. I think I have concerns about like their offensive flow, as late in the season, as the Clippers have kind of gone back down, they kind of get back to old habits where they just like do a lot of isolations. They aren't really running their sets like they were early in the season when they were getting such great shots for everyone, not moving with as much purpose. And that stuff kills you in the playoffs, especially when the other team, which we assume Dallas, is going to be buttoned up and they're going to be running their stuff. And especially with Luka and Kyrie on the floor together, like, I'm not really sure what the Clippers' answer to that is going to be. So maybe the Clippers can turn it around in no time. But I think late in the season, as well as the last 10 years of Clippers playoffs, like, don't inspire a ton of confidence.
Right. It's like, I'm supposed to look at this situation with the Mavs playing like they are, and with how Luka's played against them in the past, and with Kawhi being banged up, and how the Clippers have limped along at the end of the season, and pick them to win. I don't have that in me, like, man. And it could be, here's the thing, we could get into this series and it's like Kawhi game 1 goes out there, knee isn't good, they tried to force it too soon, series over. Completely possible. Not saying it's going to happen, we're just guessing. But I do know that knee swelling, he can't play 5-on-5 today on a Wednesday when the game is on Sunday? That's not good, man. That's not great.
That's plenty of time. Some Vicodin, some Ivermectin, some.
It's possible.
Just get Aaron Rodgers on the line, and he'll.
With the history of Kawhi knee injuries, mind
shape.
you, this isn't some random guy. This is Kawhi.
Yeah.
I just don't know. I mean, this almost feels like, I'm not saying this will happen, but like if it came out like actually he's not ready to go and he can't play, and that's what it turned into, I wouldn't be completely shocked, man. Because we've had that type of thing happened before. So I'll say Mavs in 6, because I don't know how healthy, because I don't know if Kawhi is actually going to be out for a significant amount of time. And I think if Kawhi is good to go on 100%, we know he can turn it on and he'll get him a couple. But I'm more tempted to pick 5 than 7. I'll say that.
I feel like the
I think I'm
Clippers
gonna
and
go
Sixers
Mavs in
are
5.
in, I feel like the Clippers and Sixers are in the same vein of like likely to stay healthy for an entire playoff run.
Extremely low.
Yeah,
Extremely
you make guys like
low.
that. It's tough.
Yeah.
What about you, Theo?
I think I'd go Mavs in 5.
I'll go Clippers in 7. I think there's going to be some medical tomfoolery going on, and I can just imagine
predicting a
sitting there at the start of the game
and
the medical miracle is going to happen, and then I'm going to be sitting there on my couch, and I'm going to see Paul George and Kawhi and Harden and Westbrook out there, and I'm going to say, what have the Mavs got for us on defense? And the flip is the switch is going to magically flip, and all these old vets are going to lock in, and they're going to give the Clippers a series, or they're going to give the
Look,
they're going to give
I mean,
the
it
other
hasn't
team a
worked the
series.
last 9 years or so. Maybe it'll work this year. Who knows?
This is their year. This is
This is.
For
I
sure.
mean, are they not due? Yeah. Like I feel like
This
if
does
any
not
team has
jive
ever
well.
been due.
I do buy into the Luka is the best playoff performer ever narrative, though, which is making this tough for me. Like, not ever, obviously, but that guy just seems to be unconscious
up
in the
there.
playoffs. He's.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what happens when you're playing like legit pro ball since you're 14. Like he is built for it.
I guess I just think that we're going to get an all-time series here. I think Luke is going to be at the peak of his powers, and all the Clippers are going to be healthy in a medical miracle, and it's going to be awesome. It's going to be back and forth, and the Clippers will
As a
win
neutral fan, I absolutely hope you're right. Like that would be awesome.
We'll talk about
hope
it for
you're
years.
Yes.
well, we can move on to the Eastern Conference, and I think there's no reason not to just go ahead and get to them. Cavs versus the Orlando Magic. The Cavs said, we're very, very scared of playing Philadelphia. We're going to intentionally lose against my Charlotte Hornets, which then cost them the best odds. Or the better odds. What are you saying?
Were they thinking we just really love the idea of playing the Magic? Was it that they were scared of the 76ers?
If I was Orlando's, if I was coaching Orlando, that's what I would be saying. I would be saying they think you're weak. I mean, it was tough to know whether or not they'd actually be playing Orlando or whatever, but I'd be that's the narrative I'd be pushing. I think this is going to be a rock fight of a series. I don't think that's a bold take at all. We know what happened to the Cavs last year. Spacing wasn't good enough. Knicks had a great defense. They really constricted it on Mitchell and Garland. Pretty much a disaster. They have a little bit better spacing this year. It's not perfect, but it's definitely not as bad as it was last season. However, the team they're going up against, Orlando, might have an even better defense than that Knicks team. However, they have a very similar problem. Their spacing is terrible. So I think I'm not saying it's two exactly the same teams. I don't want to go that far, but there's some similarities there that's going to make it a weird series, I think.
So first of all, we all know that God will punish the Cavs for what they did,
and that's the other thing that really hurts. And it's just not right.
It just doesn't sit right in my heart what they did. Like I get it from a logical perspective, but also like you're gonna have to play Boston in the second round if you win. So like I guess you're just like the call came from upstairs. Like we want to win one series. We don't,
exactly.
We
want to win a series. They said we'd rather have. And here's the thing that kills me is that like if they had won, they wouldn't be playing against the 76ers and they wouldn't be going up against Boston in round 2. They would have been much better off to win. And the Hornets were also tanking that game. They were playing like absolutely nobody. They easily could have won that game if they wanted to. So it was a bad decision. They really messed up. I know they didn't know how the games are going to play out. But yeah, it wasn't good.
From a competitive standpoint, man, like you gotta want to win. Like, I don't know. It's the same thing with who's the guy that just got banned for life
Jonte
for
Porter?
betting? Yeah, just, like, bro, why
Mizzou
are you
legend,
betting
by
on
the
your
way?
Mizzou legend, betting on your own team to lose? Just from like a competitive standpoint, what a loser play, man! What an
I just learned
absolute loser play.
that he is Michael Porter Jr.'s brother. I did not know that.
Yes, he is. That family is certifiably
I did not know that.
nuts. Certifiably
That is what I learned.
nuts. Mm-hmm.
They are.
Yep. Yep. They're an interesting bunch. But yeah, the Hornets played like Marquez Bolden and JT Thor and Leaky Black 40 minutes, and they still beat the Cavs. So they're not in heaven's good graces. But I do think they have some possible tactical advantages over the Magic that could really help them out. And one thing that, like you said, is that, like you said, the Magic are a really, really bad shooting team. And I have pretty significant worries about their offense in the playoffs. Like, obviously, Paolo had a really nice year. I think maybe he is like a little overrated by some people because he is still quite inefficient.
He's so young. It's like it's not that I necessarily disagree with the hype around him. It's like we're just getting a little bit ahead of ourselves is all.
I think Paolo's best thing this year is his playmaking has been phenomenal. He is such a great passer off of his own driving gravity because he's enormous and he gets downhill so easily and he commands so much attention. And he's such a great passer to cutters, skipping out to shooters. But the Magic don't really have the shooters to take advantage of that playmaking. Like, Suggs is a pretty good shooter this year. He's definitely taken a shot-making leap. Franz having the worst shooting year of his career. Like, Fultz isn't a shooter. Anthony Black isn't a shooter. And that stuff, like, we've seen exactly what happened to the Cavs last playoffs, where the Knicks just said, we're going to make your worst players beat us. And that's been a pretty safe defensive formula for teams. And I think on the other hand, the Cavs are built a lot better to avoid that. Not only with their free agent moves, right? Like adding Strus and Niang and Sam Merrill coming into his own, a bunch of great shooters and secondary playmakers. Isaac Okoro's improvement this year has been huge.
Yes.
Like that's a guy you want to keep on the floor as much as possible because he's one of the 3 best isolation defenders in the entire league. There aren't very many guys better than him at just throwing him on someone and say, don't let him score. Like he is like your shutdown corner type defensive player. And you need that in the playoffs. But when the Knicks can just totally sag off, and I don't think it was as much the shooting last year as it was just his total inability to like put the ball on the floor to make decisions. And this year he's like doubled his frequency on drives. He's obviously shooting the ball better, but he looks way more confident making decisions off the catch, driving. And if Okoro's a guy who you can play big minutes in the playoffs and not have exploited, like that's a game changer. That's a real like two-way wing who is wrecking you on the defensive end. And I think if there's any matchup where the Mobley Allen pairing isn't going to be that problematic, I think it's this one. Where the Magic being such a paint-oriented team, it's like you can kind of get away with it. Where I think, generally speaking, I think the Cavs are at their best when they stagger those two as much as possible. But in this series specifically, especially because when they do play together, they're ridiculous on defense. Like, and the Cavs defense is with those two on the floor is great. And I don't know how the Magic generate consistent offense because since they're such like a chaos based team, they're one of the highest transition frequency. They create like top 3 in turnovers, obviously, largely because of how amazing guys like Suggs and Franz are on the defensive end. But are they going to be able to generate consistent offense in the half court when the game slows down? And the Cavs have Donovan Mitchell, who had an uncharacteristically bad playoff series against the Knicks last year, but Mitchell has historically been a ridiculous playoff riser, like someone who dominated, carried Utah teams, honestly, probably farther than they should have gone, just being such an incredible shot creator incredible downhill. I mean, he hasn't he's not going to make All NBA this year because of the games missed, and he is a little banged up at the moment. But purely on when they've been available, I think Donovan Mitchell has been an easy top 10 player this year. Like he's had a crazy year on offense, scoring the ball. His possibly the best passing year of his whole career. His defense has been awesome, and if he's playing like we know he can, it might just be a case where he's so far and away the best player in the series that the Magic just don't have much of an answer. And of course, Garland is there too, who's had a bit of a down year, but we know what he can do as well. He had a couple really good games against the Knicks, one or two last series as well. So I don't know. I think it'd be a close series. And I honestly don't really know who I think is going to win, but I think the Cavs on paper make more sense.
Cavs
and
they
do have.
Thank you, Blaiden.
I respect the confidence. I really agree with Paulo. It's like the passing we've seen from him has really made me feel better than I did at the start of the year about what his ceiling was as a player and who he could be as the number one guy on this team in the coming years. But right now, he does not have a full bag of counters to go deal with teams honing in on him in the playoffs. I don't think, especially a team that's so good defensively.
I think one of the biggest issues with him right now is his approach, which even more than the skill stuff, which honestly he has most of. And this is what's always dubious because it's hard to know how much you can really adjust someone's wiring and how they approach basketball and how they play the game. Paolo is one of the most enormous human beings that you'll see with insane athleticism, and yet he plays, especially at the rim, like he's a 6'2" guard. He loves to take fadeaway pull-ups and contort his body and do scoop layups when I just want him to just run through people and draw fouls. Right. And when he does it, it looks good. And I think long term, I think that means there's room for upside, right? If he can develop this skill, which he should be able to, then he could be a legitimate 1A type star. But right now, at age 21, I'm unsure Paolo is that. And I think Franz is going to be their most impactful player in this series. I think he's going to have to do a lot of carrying with keeping that offense afloat. And it's, I think he can do it. I think Franz is awesome, but also it's a lot to ask of someone who's not a legit superstar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I lean that I think the Cavs spacing is decently better. I really agree about Okoro as well. It's not about having guys who can shoot. It's about having guys who can shoot and defend so you don't have to pick. That goes back to what we were saying about the Mavs where they're good and they've got tools to choose from, but how many of them are good both ways where you're not really having to choose? Or you look at Boston. Why are they so good? They don't have to choose ever, I just think with a really young, inefficient number one in Paolo, and I think worse shooting problems, I'm probably going to lean Cavs in 7 and say Mitchell gets it done for at least one series. I don't think they fare very well against Boston if that's inevitably who they end up facing off against. I think that would be a very unfun way to end the season as opposed to if you had gone up against the Pacers and maybe it's a little bit tougher of a matchup in some aspects, but then you have the potential to maybe, go beat the team you saw next. But I'll go Cavs in 7. I'm open to the idea of the basketball gods ensuring a righteous Orlando victory, however.
I could maybe see a scenario where the Cavs are guilty of playing too fast and the vibes have just been atrocious recently and the Magic are just so long and force so many turnovers that the Cavs could just play the ugliest 6 games of basketball that you've ever seen in your life. But I overall think that if the Cavs lose this, it's going to be them beating themselves with turnovers and just messiness.
Yep, I agree.
I think the main thing that I'm looking for is or the thing that I expect is maybe a couple disaster classes, but overall, the Magic scoring 80 points and Mitchell having 45 by himself. I just think that that's a very strong possibility, even with Jalen Suggs. Mitchell is such a good scorer, and I think that just kind of trumps good point of attack defense. And then the Cavs kind of can cancel Banchero out with Mobley. Can they not? Like, that's going to be really tough sledding for Banchero going up against this team, I'd have to imagine. And then, and probably same deal vice versa for Mobley. But Mobley can pass it to Garland or Mitchell, and Banchero doesn't have that. So the Cavs are the better roster. I could see God smiting them, but I'm going to say that they can win.
Yeah.
Blaiden was on my side earlier, so I'll say Cavs in 4 with him.
I'm gonna say Cavs. I'm gonna say Cavs in 6. This sounds like I hate resorting to this, but the vibes are really the main thing working against the Cavs. The Magic's vibes are certainly stronger, and I think maybe a more concrete way that like the Mavs certainly are going to have a physicality advantage, and in the playoffs, the importance of that can't be understated. Like how important it is to have guys who are strong and physical and just like have dog in them. It's like it sounds dumb, but it does matter, and like everyone kind of knows that, right?
Yeah.
But I think there's too much going for the Cavs on paper that I'm going to be a coward and stick with the team that should win, right? The Cavs' only like main real defensive weakness this year is that they've been pretty bad defending threes. They give up a lot of them. They aren't always the best getting out, especially with the 2 big lineups. And the Magic are like one of the worst equipped teams in the league to punish that. So that, along with especially the inexperience with the Magic on offense, I'm going to say Cavs in 6. But it would not shock me to see the Magic like just destroy them. That wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
So that leaves us with one series left to talk about. And this is maybe the series that I don't know what to think about the most of all of them. It's Bucks versus Pacers. But Giannis is like confirmed out early.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I see the Warriors and the way they looked at the end of the play-in game, and I worry about the Bucks. I worry that the Bucks could look much the same way against this Pacers
I pray
team.
you're correct.
That was my
I don't think it's
just
unreasonable
initial
at all.
vibe check. Yeah.
I think
Brooke Lopez, campaign, Dame Lillard, it's Chris Middleton. It's like, could they be gassed? The Pacers like to push the pace. They have had a ton of success versus the Bucks this season. Giannis, I think, could come back and look. I mean, the Pacers can't stop Giannis. Like, there's just no chance that anybody can do anything against him. But if he comes back and they're down,
and he's not 100%, which has happened.
He would
it's
have
what
to push
happened
himself
last year, where he was there,
we saw it
but
last
he wasn't.
year.
Yep, he wasn't 100%, and that's the thing that's the big deal. Guys come back where they play through injuries and they're not 100%, and if it's like your team's best player, that kind of cooks you too. You can't be banged up in that way either, for the most part, typically. And for Milwaukee, I'm sitting here thinking like they're a very old team. With Giannis out, I mean, their main guys are all about as old as you can possibly get for a team build. And they've all been a little bit banged up, and their defense has been like not very good down the stretch. And now no Giannis too against a Pacers offense. I know the Pacers defense isn't that great either, but to me, it's like the Bucks' path here is Dame saves them until Giannis gets back, pretty much, and he goes, the mode that he can go. But he hasn't had his greatest season ever. I'm a little nervous. It's like he's been good without Giannis this year. They've been okay. They've survived when Dame's been there. But I'm very, very worried about it.
Yeah, and since the All-Star break, fun fact, the Bucks and the Pacers defensive rating is almost exactly the same. And as weirdly, as like an analyst and as a Pacers homer, my head and my heart are kind of aligning here in that it seems like the stars are kind of perfect for the Pacers to pull this off. And of course, Giannis is the big factor, right? I mean, the Pacers were 4-1 and kind of owned the Bucks to a hilarious degree this year, but the one game they lost was when Giannis scored 65. And if Giannis is going to do that, it's ridiculous. If Giannis is going to do that, then Giannis is going to do that. Like he's one of those playoff performers where you like you tip your cap, and it is what it is. But I do think the Pacers tactically, roster-wise, match up really well with an old, slow Bucks team that struggles to defend in transition and struggles to defend pace. The Bucks kind of like still run their same patented like way deep drop with Brook, but without having a guy like Drew Holiday to pressure ball handlers and to stay attached against screens, you're giving up open jumpers. And the Pacers are the most efficient mid-range shooting team in the league. They take and make a bunch of threes, and the Bucks are not good at defending that. Brook and Giannis are still pretty menacing at the basket, but the Pacers are so good at creating open looks there with all their motion and all of their great offense and how much they play in transition that they might just be able to muscle through them anyway, to the point where I think even if Giannis plays, like, let's say Giannis comes back game 3, I think they still have a decent shot. And I think the Siakam trade has been huge for them. A proven playoff commodity, right? Someone who has won a title as like a second scoring option and is better than he was, when he was a third-year player or whatever in Toronto. He's unlocked a new dimension for the Pacers in terms of what they can do with his mid-post scoring and his creation out of the post and from the free throw line extended area. And then I think Halliburton, while certainly is flawed and we've seen teams take him out of games, he is healthy again, and he is obviously going to be a dynamic playmaker and shooter. And the Pacers are loaded up and down with offensive talent and guys who can score and get their own shot. And their defense isn't great, but man, talk about a head coaching disparity. We have Rick Carlisle, who has done it on the big stage, who has been one of the best coaches in the league this year, has helped this Pacers team become a historic offense and turn their defense around to be, just regular below average instead of historically bad like they were at the beginning of the season. And like, I'm just not going to bet on a Doc Rivers led team to do it in the playoffs.
I mean, and this is what kills me. It's like,
I'm just not going to do it.
Outside of Dame and Giannis and the fact that those guys are just such big stars, it feels psychotic to pick the Bucks. They've ended the season horribly. You're going to talk about bad vibes. Does any team have worse vibes going into the postseason than Milwaukee? I mean, it's a disaster.
And Chris also not fully healthy too.
And Chris isn't fully healthy, and Giannis is out and like trying to get back. Not even a Kawhi situation where we're being careful. You could talk me into that. Giannis is just out, and he's been very injured in many of his playoff series that he's played before. And we've seen when he's not 100% what that can look like. I couldn't agree more. I think the pick here is Indiana.
And I love being on the side of the bracket where we're not going to have to play the Celtics in the second round if we do win.
And you can go you can have fun in the second round. I mean, who knows? We want to pause real quick though. Theo.
Yeah, do we want to? He just kind of.
He's back.
Let's just get back into it then.
He's back.
He's back.
Point being, I was very excited as a Pacers fan that we don't have to play the Knicks in the first round. I am much more. I would be much more afraid of the Knicks than the Bucks currently. I think the Knicks are incredibly scary, but yeah, I feel scarily confident. Like this is not a normal feeling as a Pacers fan, and as an analyst from a more neutral point of view, the Pacers have such a schematic advantage. I mean, to be fair, all of the matchups came before the Siakam trade and before the Doc Rivers hiring. So both of these teams look very different. And there is
one team got worse and the other got better.
Yes, Theo, thank you for that. I agree with you. But seriously, like when you have a guy like Dame who hasn't been the same this year, if the Bucks had like last year offense level Dame where he was like the best offensive player in the league, they would be just fine. But Dame is just, he's not as efficient this year. I think he notably seems to have a bit less juice on his drives.
Yes.
He's just not pressuring the rim as much as he used to. And he's still going to have games where he goes nuclear. But the Pacers, I think, have, ways, especially like the Pacers have zero answers for Giannis. They have nothing for him. But the Pacers have some pretty solid guard / perimeter defenders. Like Neesmith is probably their best defender at this point. He's been phenomenal this year on primary handlers. Andrew Nembhard, since he's slotted into the starting lineup, has been really solid. TJ McConnell is just like annoying as hell and can give guys problems. So I think while the Pacers like are just going to have to kind of pray that Giannis doesn't rip them apart, I think they can dictate a little bit more against Dame, even if he is playing well.
I mean, it's not like it's been Mickey Mouse wins against the Bucks this year for them. Dame has averaged 42 against the Pacers this year, and I think he's played in all 5 of the matchups. So it's not like the 60-point game was the only one that he was healthy for, and the rest were all like, stinkers or whatever. Like they have proven that they can overcome even a healthy Giannis and beat the Bucks. And yeah, Dame would need to lock in and play the best basketball of the season. And I think he's not going to be immune to the pace of the Pacers play, the pace that they play at. And I think we saw it with Curry in the play-in round against the Kings. Like eventually as an older guard, it did kind of feel like he was a bit gassed. And I think that Dame will appear gassed at some point in this series, or maybe even at the end of the first game. I really think it's going to look like that for the Bucks.
And because the Pacers are going to hunt him on defense. They're absolutely going to hunt him.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. So I might say the Bucks just pretty quickly exit. I think that, I don't know. When the vibes of the season are this bad, and Doc Rivers is your head coach and he never has any playoff success, and you're playing against this team that has famously owned you to the point that we were talking about it, months ago. Like, hey, the Pacers own the Bucks. If they play, keep that in mind. It just seems like a nightmare situation, and I maybe things miraculously change, but I think that the Pacers can beat them in 5 or 6. I'll say 5 and be controversial, I guess.
I'll say Pacers in 6. That's what I said when the matchups were initially announced. That was my instant gut reaction. And after thinking about it, going back and watching the games and looking at it more, I have come to the same conclusion. It certainly wouldn't shock me if the Bucks won this series. They have the best player in the series if he's playing, and that just obviously matters a ton. But it's I don't know. I feel pretty good. Maybe I shouldn't.
Stars
but I
are
feel
lining
pretty
up,
good.
Man.
I feel like
this is one that I feel like the Bucks fans would say, yeah, man, we feel pretty bad. I don't. There's no way they can be confident.
I was on a podcast the other day where I was doing a preview of the series with another Bucks creator, and they were like, "Yeah, this is." I don't know. I'm not feeling great. I think they ended up picking the Bucks to win the series, but it wasn't a confident the Bucks gonna win. It was
with his eyes, he said something different.
I don't know. She was I don't know if it's gonna work.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the Pacers in 6 myself. Maybe there's a chance that Dame turns it back on and he can get it done, or maybe Giannis comes back real quick and he's good. But I think at some point you got to look at the indicators saying, everything.
I think
looks
with
like
the Bucks, there's so much reliance on unknowns and what ifs. It's if Giannis is fully good, and if Chris is good, and if Dame, magically reverts to last season. But where with the Pacers, it's okay, here are the concrete things that we know about this team. We know Halliburton's great. We know Siakam is great. We know the way they play gives the Bucks trouble. And it's at some point, I think I'm not going to try to galaxy brain it and think that, and just say, oh, we're going to lose. So who knows? But go Pacers.
When it comes to your feet, eBay's got your back, because with eBay's authenticity guarantee, real experts are checking your sneakers, every stitch down to the sole. Me personally, I'm a big fan of a classic Air Force, or maybe a nice suede or leather boot, but whatever it is that you're adding to the lineup next, head to eBay. From the drop to your doorstep, eBay does not play with your sneaker game. Just look for that blue check mark. So ensure your next purchase is the real deal. Visit ebay.com for terms. Wow. There's really a world where all of our teams win a playoff series, except
I was going to say.
Except for who? Yeah, bro. They were just awful this year. This was just a pathetic showing from the Hornets.
Hey, at least they made the right pick at number 2.
Hey, I'll give them that. It's looking pretty good.
That is looking good
for Miller.
Miller is looking good, and they're going to have another they're going to have another high pick this year, and honestly, probably the year after.
Speaking of Ben, I want I want to as fast as possible since we're an hour and 19 into this.
Yeah.
Give me the top
What's
the top three prospects in the NBA draft. Like,
okay, this draft.
So I know when I see the mock drafts, I like can put into my head like what they're about because I don't know.
Okay, so this draft is frankly really bad. It's like a historically bad draft. I think to me it's the worst draft since 2013.
If as an NFL draft head yourself, what caliber of NFL draft prospect is the equivalent of the NBA prospect one in this class? Is it like if
I don't know. I feel like
Byron Murphy was the best prospect in the class or something?
Not that bad. I feel like maybe like, you know, maybe if like Joe Alt or like Fuaga or like one of the best like tackles was like your best guy on the board, or something like that, or some like, or I was gonna say Jaden Daniels, but I don't like Jaden Daniels enough to say that. I generally agree with the Jaden Daniels opinion from this podcast. But,
maybe like Fashanu.
Yeah, he could be like a Fashanu level guy. You know, someone who I think is going to probably be a good player and has some real star upside if everything hits right. But yeah, and this draft is not going to be very deep either, especially because like NIL considerations are just going to make the back ends of drafts from now like get deeper and weaker because players on the fringes are choosing going back to school more and more because they have, you know, better. You know, it's like I'd rather, instead of being a late second round pick, I'd rather go be a superstar on my campus and make comparable money with NIL. But so the top three prospects for me, so the top two, and I always differ from consensus pretty significantly this year, especially. The one that I don't is Alex Sarr is another French center who is my top prospect in this draft. Not nearly.
Back.
Yeah, we got Wemp. No. So Sarr, I think, is pretty consensus, like a top 2, top 3 guy, and I think that's correct. He is 7-footer with incredible mobility, insane defensive upside. My defensive comp for him has been Jaren Jackson, that kind of like ground coverage, rim protection, like perimeter defense. Offense is a lot more raw than Jaren. Like, he's not an amazing shooter, but he flashed some pretty crazy like ball handling and passing stuff. And I think there's upside for him to be a good offensive player. I think he's the safest guy probably in the draft, and I think he has the highest ceiling too. So I'd take him number 1. And then there's Ron Hollins, who is not viewed very highly in the eyes of the mainstream. And I can only imagine that's because people don't watch G League Ignite. Like this kind of always happens with these prospects where Ron, he's like a 6'7", crazy hyper athlete wing who didn't score or shoot super efficiently this year, but is one of the most incredible slashing, driving prospects on the wing that I've seen. Like in a way that probably most reminds me of a guy like Jaylen Brown coming out. They're different players, but in the same way that they were both pretty raw and comically overwhelming physically. But I think Ron is like, he's a smart passer. He's a great defender. He's like a competitive psychopath type. And I feel like those are the guys who I want to bet on. He's also, I believe, like a top 5 youngest player in the draft. So he's super young, psycho competitive motor, special explosive athlete. And he's improved a ton as a ball handler and a playmaker and a scorer this year. So I think he's an easy top 3 pick. And then the other guy I would say is, well, so I'm just going to give you 4 because I think there's a tier. I think there's a tier of 4. And it's 2 point guards, and it's Nikola Topic. Yes, another Nikola Itch. We're getting a third one.
Perfect.
Who's like a really like bursty, tall, young point guard who's playing in Serbia. He's not the greatest shooter in the world, and he has defensive issues, but if you need a guy who is going to get into the paint every single time and is a really good pick and roll passer, I think Topic is that guy. Again, even one of the youngest players in the draft, was incredibly productive in a legit pro league this year, which are always good signs. And then on the other side of that coin is Isaiah Collier, who was a point guard at USC this past year, who didn't have the most incredible statistical year, but is a really overwhelming downhill athlete, like crazy strong, just bully guard type, but he's also really quick, can shoot from the mid range, has high level passing flashes, and is one of the only guys along with Topic who I think can be your like primary initiator type point guard. So those are my top 4 at the moment. There are other good prospects in this range, but it's if you're looking for your franchise changing cornerstone, you might have to wait until one of the next drafts that all look to be extremely stacked. So
nice.
So I'm guessing this will be the year that the Hornets get the first overall pick. That's my prediction of all the years.
Yeah, and they're gonna and then they're gonna miss out on Cooper Flag and Cam Boozer and such in the years to come. Watching like scouting for prospects like high school really does make me feel so old. I'm sure Matt and others listening will know of Brandon Bass, Celtics legend, whose son is currently like playing up in AAU. Also, his teammate is one of Jason Richardson's sons. Who that kid's going to be a monster. Like that kid is ridiculously good. And I'm like, I'm not old, but I feel old. It's like,
yeah, we talk about when we're doing NFL draft stuff if they pass the younger than Theo test at this point.
Theo, how old are you? Are you like 24?
I'm 23. I'm 23. So,
okay, so
it's not a crazy bar.
He's in August 23 though.
Okay.
I am. It's a good
Okay,
benchmark. If you're older than me, then you're an old prospect. If you're younger than me, it's okay.
Say, if you're a 24-year-old prospect, I'm probably not super interested in you unless you're like Joe Burrow or something. But
yeah. But awesome. I think that's pretty much it for this episode. Long one, but a good one. Thank you so much for coming on, Ben. We look forward to having you on.
Always a pleasure.
Hopefully,
one more thing. We're not at an hour 30 yet. Who do you have winning the NBA Finals? We have not made that prediction.
Okay.
I'll take Denver. Over. I mean, Denver over Boston is so boring, but it's just like hard to pick anything else. So I'll take Denver in 6 over Boston. But if you made me pick someone else, like if you're like, you cannot pick Denver and Boston, you have to pick one of those teams to not make the finals. I'll go Mavs.
That's exactly where I would be. I'd say Denver over Boston. But it's close. I could see Boston winning it. But if I had to pick none, I like the Mavs as a third team.
I also want to quickly say that I don't think this team's going to make the finals, but I do think that OKC is going to function well in the playoffs. And I think
that would be my one.
And I think
if there was
their experience issues are being overblown.
I 100% agree.
I'm disappointed to not hear any Cavs or Kings in the mix here.
The Cavs will not be hoisting the Larry O'Brien.
Cavs versus Kings in the NBA Finals, man. Make it happen.
Come on, man.
I mean, the Kings might make it in like hockey or whatever. I don't know how the LA Kings are doing these days. I don't know anything about hockey.
I could see there maybe being like a Thunder 76ers finals, maybe if there's like a weird one.
The
OKC is my favorite non-main two, but I would say
the funniest outcome this year would be this finally being the year that the Sixers beat the Celtics in a series. This would be the funniest year for that to happen. Like both Sixers and Celtics Twitter would be appointment viewing every single night.
I kind of think
they always are during those
pretty
series,
good. I kind of think
I will not buy into the Sixers until I see them do it. I won't.
That's kind of how I feel, Blaiden. Though I do think like their offense with Nick Nurse is like as good as it's ever been in terms of mitigating their issues in the playoffs they've had in the past with just being really stagnant and having no plan. Embiid's had his best passing year. Maxey is having a career year. They don't have, playoff choker Harden. I'm kidding. I am a Harden guy, but I think that's kind of how it goes. Theo.
Forks up.
On paper, I think the Sixers have it, but that we've been saying that for a long time, and I tend to agree with Blaiden that I'll believe it when I see it. Like, it wouldn't shock me, but like once they do it, I'll be like, okay, that made sense.
Yeah. Well,
100%.
Well, that wraps things up for another episode of Stay Hot. Yeah, NFL draft right around the corner. I think it's exactly 1 week from when this episode comes out. So hopefully all of our teams do exactly what we want them to do. And hopefully the NBA playoffs go exactly as we have predicted them here today. But until
We're going to
then,
manifest the Panthers taking Lad McConkey. I'll take it.
That's all I want, man.
I just know the Chiefs have the pick right before.
Not at 33,
It
buddy.
feels
Oh, you would take Wingo at 33, man, and he just gets off the ball quick and nothing else. So I don't want to hear it. McConkey,
Let me get Rook Orororo.
come on, man.
It's going to
33
be
overall.
It's going to be absolutely scenes when the Packers draft Fisk or whatever at 26 or something. And
that's what I'm saying, man.
Fuck you.
All right. Well,
End the show.
End the show. It's over. Bye. No, thank you all so much for tuning in. And as always, we will catch you on the flippity flop.